Hey, this is Ken Vellante with the Something Rather Than Nothing podcast. I want to tell you about a realization I had working with Susie DeVille in her book, Buoyant. I myself hadn't been to art school or taken many art classes in my life, and there were a lot of super simple but profound activities in Susie DeVille's book. In her class, I was able to illustrate in different ways than I had. Even a simple exercise of drawing an image upside down actually helped me to discoveries on how I could illustrate. I'm still in the infancy of that, but really good breakthroughs and simple and profound. Have a hearty personal recommendation for Susie DeVille's Buoyant and her classes, which are really geared towards artists and start from moving you from where you are, if it feels like a grind, to some other type of place in your business, in your life, and your art. So Susie DeVille's Buoyant, highly recommended. Get yourself a copy now.
You are listening to Something Rather Than Nothing. Creator and host, Ken Vellante. Editor and producer, Peter Bauer.
Hey everybody, this is Ken Vellante. I've got a special episode here with Nick Malster, co-founder of Fountain. And Fountain is an incredible app that allows users, listeners, to engage in value for value processes, supporting podcasts that they love and art. Nick, I could talk a whole bunch about Fountain and let you speak to the audience in 20 minutes, but I'm going to skip that whole process. Nick, great to see you. We've talked before. Great to see you and talk to you. And tell us what's up. What are you up to?
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Ken. Yeah, so I'm Nick. I'm the co-founder of Fountain. Like Ken said, Fountain is a podcast app that has integrated payments into the experience. And what this allows is the delivery of I guess it's a concept, value for value, which is you receive value from content from creators that you really enjoy, and you want to send some content back to show your appreciation and support the artist, support the creator. And Fountain's payments all run on the Bitcoin Lightning Network. So the reason we do that is because it allows us to program money in different ways that are just not possible when you're working with PayPal, Visa, anything else, right? So you can actually stream money for every minute you listen to the creator, and you can send a boost, which is like a payment with a comment. And yeah, I think what's where value started was just that. And then what we didn't realize when we were getting into this is that actually the act of sending someone money is an amazing signal of value for other people in the community. So we started surfacing the boosts in an activity feed. So you can follow your friends on Fountain, follow other listeners of the shows you enjoy, and you can discover new episodes, things you wouldn't have heard before that are sort of based on their interests, and click through and go and listen. And we also have clips as well. So you can create short clips of the best moments in podcasts. Again, you can just find amazing clips in your feed, go and check out some stuff you wouldn't have heard before. And yeah, so really what the promise is for the creator is, discovery, getting their content discovered and finding their audience, finding their fans. It's the community that you get that doesn't really exist on other apps like Spotify or Apple Podcasts, because you've got the boost, you've got replies, you've got full-on conversations and commentary on the things you're hearing in the episodes and people discussing them. And then you've got the monetization as well. So that's really what Fountain does in a nutshell.
Yeah, well, and thanks for the nutshell. There's a lot. There's a lot in there, and I think what you said is true about Fountain. Something Rather Than Nothing podcast. I've been doing it for 4 years, and with podcasts, you want to be everywhere. But I'm also particularly sensitive, kind of to like the ecosystems that exist, right? If you think of social media apps, not necessarily players, but in players themselves, it's like everybody's like, "What can I do with this?" Like, what can I do? Like, can I talk? Can I request an episode? Can I connect to the creator? Can I find out? Like, there's this energy when people listen to podcasts. And one of the things about I keep saying that's within Fountain is that it's geared towards engagement. But the other piece, which is just utterly unique, is the tendency for people who listen to create clips for the show for people. It's not a behavior. It's like, I'm interested in behavior. This is a philosophy show, but I'm interested in behavior. There's a behavior here with people you would not even come in contact with no necessarily overt. If it's a popular clip, that could be rewarded as well. That's awesome. That's incentivized. But at the nut of it, it seems like there's just a nice action that people are taking on behalf of creators. It's super noticeable. You don't find it anywhere else, both in maybe the ability, but the propensity for users to do that. It's very conspicuous in Fountain, and it makes a creator excited. I'm like, shit, okay, I know what somebody liked out there. There's a clip of this 15 seconds, and it isn't what my brain thought was important. So really dig on that piece, Nick.
Yeah, well, there's that famous quote, show me the incentives and I'll show you the outcomes, right? I don't know who said that. Maybe it was that guy, Charlie Munger, the guy that looks like a big
I like
toad.
that. I like that.
He, whoever said that, they were onto something. And if you think about a creator, like, your primary job is just to create content of value to your audience. But in this modern day and age with the platforms that we use, you're actually required to become a good marketer first. You have to learn how to master the YouTube algorithms, create the perfect thumbnails, find sponsors, like all these different things. And it's actually a lot more than the creators bargain for. And the build it and they will come approach just is not going to get you there. And we think that the best way to achieve those outcomes of getting discovered, building the community, being able to earn a living off your work, off your art, is to essentially outsource it to your fans. But you can only really do that if the incentives are right. And that's why, when you send a boost on Fountain and someone else sees it, they can like that boost, the comment that you said, and they can tip you for it. And if you create a clip and someone else liked your clip, you can earn some Bitcoin for the clip you made. So actually, we've kind of given this community the tools to be able to go and share the things they love, take them to new places, because they're actually being rewarded for it. And I think that's why it works. And I think the other cool thing as well is just about like the general sense of positivity you get from being on Fountain, like the type of comments there. Like if you've gone on YouTube and you look in the comments, like, yeah, it's a riot in there.
Yeah.
Digging each other out. Like, it's not very friendly. And I think with Fountain, because you have to pay to send a comment, you kind of, you're not just going to like
put your money where your mouth is.
Spend the money, exactly right. So, yeah, and that's the other thing as well. Like, if you go on an episode page, let's say this episode when it comes out, all the boosts on the episode page are organized by value. So the ones with the most amount of money attached to them will show at the top. So if you really want to dig someone out, you've got to like pay more than everyone else. So if you look at it's not financially viable for a bot to be going and spamming like all of the episode pages. It just doesn't work. And that's why I think we have a really good natured community there who are, talking about the content and nothing else. That's really the focus. And I think that's also what separates us from Twitter. Is like, if you posted an episode link on Twitter, you're not going to get loads of, replies to that tweet about the content, because people aren't going to watch an hour-long episode on Twitter. But if you had the conversation in the place where they're going to listen to it, same thing like YouTube, all the commentary in the kind of conversation is really about the content.
Yeah. No, I really, in thinking about, and like you said, started the podcast about 4 years ago, July 2019. All the questions that come up as a creator come up as they come up, as you encounter them. You don't know to begin with what you need to look for. And yeah, you got to figure out all those type of things. There's something different about the community there, and look, part of this too in the conversation. No community is a panacea, but I think the way that it's set up, right? It's like for me, I'm an organizer. I work for in labor. You got to set things up the right way. You have to have things the right way to begin with, because otherwise you'll get the unintended consequences or intended consequences of a system that doesn't work. So it's integrated in the sense where you got to pay small amounts of money too, and we could talk a little bit about that. I mean, they could be larger, but they're recognized in that system. And there's something really cool when you mentioned to me, we talked a little bit before and talking about the idea with music within it too. There's something about the podcast or a music where there's something fun about a hit, right? Like we're all suckers for it. Like almost every human is a sucker for a hit, right? And it's like, hey, do you hear the song? You hear this song? And there's a piece of that within Fountain that's really cool. Like a comment's a hit, or somebody describes something like really well, or did you hear about like this event, and people use it maybe as a source and be like, oh, a whole bunch of other people like it too. And it becomes like this kind of hit you can kind of jump in at. And there's downsides to that, but heck, we love a hit, right? Like I want to look at a hit or listen to it. And the system sets it up for that, so you notice it. But what about you mentioned before the idea of music moving into what's going on with that idea? Because when I say hit, I also think music.
Yeah, so music can be published to an RSS feed. In fact, any audio content can. And there's lots of music that's already out there, but we don't currently recognize it in Fountain as an album or a track. It's just called a show or an episode. And the reason for that, and this kind of gets into podcasting 2.0 and the namespace, is that the RSS protocol doesn't really have until now, a global standard for recognizing the actual medium of a piece of content in an RSS feed. But the namespace that Adam and Dave at Podcasting 2.0 are developing allows developers to specify in a way that's recognizable across different apps what the type of content is. And of course, there's a load of other tags and features that supported within the namespace. For example, if you've uploaded chapters to your podcast, you can make sure that those podcast chapters are seen in the same way in all the other apps as well. It's one system that's united. So yeah, just going back to the music thing, we're going to be supporting the content medium tag, which means that any music that's published to an RSS feed and is specified as music, you'll be able to find in Fountain. And I think what's really cool about this is that, value for value, we've already proven that there's something that just makes it a great fit in podcasting, but it can also work in other mediums as well. And I think this is probably a more commonly established narrative for people broadly, which is that artists struggle to get paid for their music. If you look at Spotify, the royalty system, it's just broken, and it really exists to serve the few and not the many. For example, like here in the UK, there's a bunch of people paying for Spotify Premium, and they also sell a bunch of advertising in the UK. That gives you a pot of royalties. I think about 33% of that goes to Spotify straight off the bat, and the rest of it gets put in a pot. And based on the total number of plays or streams that a track gets, the money gets equally divided across everyone else. And that is a system that means that really the bigger artists are getting paid. But also what it means is that if I've spent all month listening to, the tracks that I love on Spotify, it means that people like Taylor Swift, who I haven't even listened to, are getting paid out of my $10 a month, £10 a month that I've paid for my subscription. So there's no transparency in the money flows in the music industry. And there's also the issue of, royalties and rights, because I suppose the music industry is more complex because you have labels, you have distributors. In a band, you could have like 7 or 8 people, playing different roles, and that's complicated. And it's also, it takes a lot of time. The money has to go to the distributor, and that's then eventually paid to the label, who then pays the artist, and that could be months later. And if you apply value for value to that problem, it means that the listener can support the artist directly as they're listening. It goes to them immediately, and the artist can also choose, hey, I'm going to split the money evenly with my bass player, my keys player, my guitarist, my drummer. So that's really exciting. So I don't know when this podcast is going out, but I imagine that by the time it does, we will have that new feature included in the app. So you'll be able to find music in the app and add it to your library to stream stats, to boost. It's pretty exciting.
Incredible. And incredible. Yeah. We'll have this show out, be July 2023 here, and talking with Nick Malster. And I've always enjoyed talking to Nick, talked a couple times, and congrats on, on your work. With Fountain as co-founder and also chatting about it. I think here's the thing. So I on my show I get a lot of everybody's an artist, right? And I got musicians, and the musicians' problem, as you laid it out in the aggregate, is the problem. I think there's I might have this wrong, but I think there's an easy position right now on those who wish to make money off musical artists is they're creating tons of stuff. They have access to tons of stuff, and it's tough to get paid for so long, particularly in the main way that folks listen to music now. Digitally. But I think about the value for value in the Fountain app, and for folks and listeners, there's just a basic setup where you can split if somebody's going to send sats, which are a derivative of Bitcoin. We'll talk a little bit more about that, but the sats to you for an episode or say a track, that could be split. So if I have an episode with Sarah Hardin, New Orleans painter, and they're on Fountain, I can have the splits go directly right that. Like you set it up exactly the way that you would like to have it go directly. And I don't know of another connection or a system that's just so direct and quick and set up by the person who's putting the thing out. That is that mechanism right there makes a ton of sense when you're talking about how does the drummer get his fucking money. So I really like that component, that component of it. Nick, how'd you get into podcasting?
I've always just been interested in podcasts. I think it's an amazing medium for telling stories. The relationship you can have with the podcast host is like no other. And yeah, you just kind of, it's funny because it's a relationship with someone that you've never met, that you've listened to like thousands of times, but you feel like you know them. But you're not able to speak to them. And I think that's kind of what really appealed to me about building Fountain, is just giving that direct feedback loop between the audience and the creator is so important. And it's not something that other podcast apps have been able to achieve. So if I've got a question for you, or I've got, a comment or a request about who I want to see on the next episode or anything like that, I can just boost you and you'll see it. Because there's money attached to it, I know you're probably going to look at it.
I'll notice you. I'll notice you. I guarantee I'm going to notice it. Notice the request for sure.
So yeah, when we actually, so my co-founder Oscar, when we originally started talking about Fountain, we weren't actually talking about a podcast app. At the time, I was working in another job. He had just sold a previous business of his, which was like an app studio. And he'd been playing around with this prototype of, I guess, just like a social audio platform where you could record short snippets and share them with other people. And you could see, what other people had to say. And I think that we realized quite quickly that, having to build up that content library was going to take a lot of time, because you have to onboard the users, you have to convince them to be able to record things. That takes time. And, we just thought, well, let's just make a podcast app. We both love podcasts, and there's a whole library of podcasts out there we can just tap into, bring into the app, and then suddenly you have the content. Now you just need the functionality that allows you to engage with it in the way we want to. And it was lucky because podcastings have been around, I think, 20 years. I think Sunday the 7th.
Yeah, just the anniversary, 20 years.
It's 20 years, and it's just amazing how little it's progressed. If you think about it, since podcasts were put in the iPod, really the same functionality is there, or at least that was the case a few years ago. And we kind of cottoned on to what Adam Curry and Dave Jones were doing with the podcast index. And Adam Curry, just to explain to your listeners, he was one of the original pioneers behind podcasting. He was working with Steve Jobs and a group of talented developers to put podcasts into iTunes and onto the iPod. And he had his own show. Originally, the first show he had was Daily Source Code. And then I guess a few years later, he started No Agenda with John Dvorak. And they have employed this value for value ethos right from the very beginning, but they've taken it to the extreme. So to the point where, even the people, the fans who create artwork for the show can get rewarded for, creating artwork, or the person who does chapters for them, they give them a split of the income from every episode. So they've always pursued value for value, and it was traditionally done through sending checks in the post, or, when PayPal, sending money on PayPal. And Bitcoin was just a solution for that, to make that thing instant. But I think the other thing besides the payments is just the decentralized nature of the version of podcasting that they envisioned. When podcasting first came about into the world, it was all based on Apple's own centralized index of podcasts. And that was fine to begin with. There were many podcast apps that started, who could just use Apple's podcast library, and then the new app they built suddenly has all the latest episodes in it. But it all started going wrong when Apple started, I guess, enforcing their content policy on what we think is acceptable content and what's not, or what's hate speech, or what don't we agree with. And if we don't agree with it, we're just going to take it down. And then suddenly all the other podcast apps realize, oh, hey, why is this show or these episodes gone missing? It's because we're using this index that Apple controls. So I think that was the thing that really motivated and inspired Adam Curry to try and regain some control and give, have a decentralized index that basically no one could fuck with. So the podcast index came first. That was the first part of the project of Podcasting 2.0. And the second part was the namespace, which was, like I mentioned, the sort of the common language that allows app developers to, use the RSS feed to adopt features that can be used universally across different apps. And value for value, the specification using Bitcoin to send payments directly to the podcaster was one of those first features. And it's just amazing how far it's come since then. There's over now, I think, 12,000 podcasts that are on the Lightning Network that can receive payments in this way. And that number is growing rapidly. And as well, I think, thanks to Fountain and the other Podcasting 2.0 apps out there, the listeners are getting involved now as well. It kind of started out as, I suppose, more of an experiment. It was people who were just interested in this new technology to see what it can do. Now we know what it can do, and we're finding the ways to really deliver it in the best way and in the most accessible way, so that even someone without any Bitcoin or any knowledge of this whole ecosystem can start using it straight away and start supporting podcasts.
Yeah. You can press it and listen. You can access all the podcasts that you want. Okay, tell me, Nick. So I'm just this. I'm just this bloke who likes podcasts, right? I heard about this Fountain app. I have a few extra dollars, right? I'm like, all right, I'm looking at Fountain, and okay, what is this Sats? Tell me what's going on for somebody. What did they do? What does this thing look like? Most people used to PayPal or whatever. So I want to get in on this. What's it look like for me?
So as a new listener, Where it started was you actually had to have Bitcoin first on a wallet somewhere, and then move that Bitcoin from your wallet over to Fountain, which you can still do, and it's really easy. You just scan an invoice, pay it, and then the money moves from one wallet to your Fountain wallet, and you can start supporting. But I think that for value to have mainstream adoption, we need to reduce some of these, obstacles in the way, because not all of us believe in Bitcoin yet. There's still a lot of skepticism broadly about crypto, and for good reason, because I suppose crypto more generally has been tarnished by a lot of these shit coins, a lot of these scams, like people getting rug pulled, and the general population is just not really quite there yet. So how can we move all those distractions out the way and give them confidence? That's really why we launched Listen to Earn last summer. So as a listener, you can just start listening to podcasts on Fountain, and you can earn some Bitcoin straight away, which means that you don't have to top up or have any Bitcoin to be able to start supporting. You just have some Bitcoin in your wallet and you can go. And I think at the same time, we also launched the ability to buy Bitcoin in the app. So you can just put in your bank card, pay with Apple Pay, Google Pay, whatever, and then you've got some Bitcoin in your wallet and you can start supporting. And that's definitely it's moved us forward a lot, but we're still not quite there yet. I think that really we have to get to the point where you don't have to actually interact with Bitcoin at any point in the process. So you log in, you see, okay, which currency do you want to see? Do you want to see currencies in Bitcoin, or do you want to see dollars, pounds, yen, euros, whatever you fancy? And you can start transacting and start paying, supporting podcasts. You can top up your wallet, but you never actually have to see the word Bitcoin. It will always be Bitcoin as a payment rail underneath that experience. But by kind of removing that, putting it in the background, and giving people a front end UI that people feel comfortable with, they can just pay in dollars. I think that's going to be the thing that brings in a broader audience. And then on the podcaster side, as a new podcaster, what do you do? Well, your podcast is, if it's in Podcast Index, which is the index of podcasts that we use, your show is already going to be on Fountain. So what you got to do is find your show, claim it, put in your email address that's in your RSS feed. We can then verify you're the owner of the feed, and then you can start receiving payments. It's definitely got much easier to get set up, but we're still a long way from being, universally accessible for a mass market audience.
Yeah, well, thanks for that too. I mean, of course it's going to be one of the main things. I mean, not even to mention, right, even the idea that there's very small to large monetization of things that folks do in other apps. It's the free aspect. It's a really interesting question, like regarding behavior, right? Like, do we engage in like free behavior that we wouldn't normally like do just because we can completely freely do it? Or like, the money where your mouth is, you tie a few cents or whatever and be like, heck, I'm not just going to waste my time and money like ragging on somebody. I'm like, this is cool. Here's a boost, right? And it's a great thing. I've even done it as a user, on Fountain myself. And you hear something you like, and it's this podcast. Who knows, where it's from, right? Just ran into it and send something that I don't know. It sticks out, but it isn't like $1 billion. It sticks out. It's a good feeling. It's a good dynamic that goes on there. And thanks for mentioning too, just as far as what's been going on and the accessibility to get into the app. And the fact is, one of the things I wanted to just mention, Nick, too, and for the listeners, I don't do too many, in art and creativity. I think you and I are talking about the whole, like within podcasting as a whole, and podcasting is different, which is why I wanted to talk to you about it. And the fact that I use and really enjoy the Fountain app and see what it can do for podcasters. So it's unmitigated my desire to talk to you about it and say, like, this is a cool spot. There's cool stuff going on over there. I had a question, just different. I'm over here in the States. You're over there in London. Just generally speaking, is there a difference in where the idea is taken off, or right where you're situated, or you see things in the US that are different? Of course, it's a worldwide app. I'm not just making it like that, but you seeing different things as far as adoption, coming in contact with Fountain. Is it a London thing, or what's going on?
It's a really good question. I think that if you look more broadly at Bitcoin adoption around the world, the US is ahead of everyone else. So yeah, typically we see that most of our users are in the US, both thinking about, the community of listeners, but also the podcasters who've taken the initiative to claim their show, start receiving payments on Fountain, and start investing, their time in that as a platform. I think that what's really interesting too is that if you look at some of the currencies around the world, I mean, it's not a funny thing, but some of the currencies are fucked. If you look at economies in Latin America, they're just crippled by hyperinflation, and Bitcoin is a way out for them. And if only their governments would adopt it as a standard, it could be a way out for the whole country and their economy. So we actually do see a lot of users in Argentina, in Brazil, in South and Central America, because they see the value of just being able to earn Bitcoin for something they were going to do already, which I think is really interesting. In Europe, I'd say that the thing that's held us back in Europe is I suppose the red tape around crypto more broadly. It's more tightly controlled. It's why you don't see apps like Cash App and Strike in places like the UK yet. So I think we've definitely got some catching up to do. But I guess as well, what's interesting is looking at the adoption of podcasting around the world too. I mean, America is, for sure, like far ahead in terms of podcasting adoption. But again, countries like Argentina are catching up really, really fast. I think that it's actually the fastest growing population for adoption of podcasting. So I guess we'll see where it goes. I think that the beautiful thing about Fountain is that it's a global audience. We have listeners and podcasters in over 100 countries around the world, and it's always amazing to see like someone in a new country has just signed up to the app. You always kind of wonder, like, what's their motives? Like, I wonder how they found it. And so we hope we're going to continue to see that grow.
Yeah, I'm still waiting for my podcast listener from Greenland. That's the tough one. That's the that's the holy grail. I don't know how to do that, but it is fun, and the fact with it being international, coming in contact, which of course the web and social media can do as well, but maybe a little bit more of a different folks you might come in contact with, like you said, in South America, or some other type of listeners, like really digging on the app. It's I gotta ask you one of the questions of the show, Nick, as a creator. I gotta give you one of the big philosophy questions. I wanted to ask you what you think art is.
It's a big question. I think, to be honest, art it's one of the things that helps us add meaning to life. Art is legacy. It's things that live on beyond our own existence, and I think it helps give people purpose. To create something that wasn't there before, that can be enjoyed by anyone. And I think the anyone is important as well. Art or content or whatever the format is, like it shouldn't be restricted. It shouldn't be behind a paywall. It has to be free and openly available to everyone. That's how it's going to inspire the widest audience possible. So it's a hard one, because there's also the argument that art shouldn't be free. You should have to pay to get into a museum, or if you want to subscribe to a podcast that has content behind a paywall, that you should have to pay for it. I guess value for value goes against that. We believe that information should be free. There's an amazing article for anyone who hasn't read it by Gigi, who is one of the pioneers of value for value, has worked very closely with Adam. It's called, what is it called? I'll have to follow up and send you a link to put it in the show notes. I think it's called The Freedom of Value, I think. The freedom of value, or the value of freedom. And it goes back to that idea of like scarcity. Like if you make something scarce, it loses its value. Like to make it free and available to everyone is the best way to release it. And information and art wants to be free.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Nick. Yeah, it's such a interviewing artists and just seeing like, how is it they put one of the things is with artists and and the work you do, Nick. I mean, you could see when you talk to folks the amount of hours, they don't, they might not even talk about it at 11:30, 2 in the morning, all those type of things, but it's there. And I think always thinking about a way to be appreciated through money for your time, recognition, boosts or comments, likes. It's the way the world is, and there's an affirmation. Artists need affirmation. You gotta keep going somehow. Nick, it's been a great pleasure. It's been a great pleasure to talk to you. Can you just drop in before we let you go? Tell folks how to find the app. Some things they're going to be seeing. We're in July 2023. You had mentioned music functionality, but just some basics as far as how to pop on and what folks might be seeing in the near future.
Yeah. So if you haven't got Fountain already, in fact, if you're listening to this podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, think about getting Fountain. You can just find us in the App Store, Google Play Store. Our website is fountain.fm. You can also find us on Twitter, Fountain_app. That's the best way to find out about all the latest developments in Fountain and new features we're releasing. And as for some of those new features, just to give you a quick teaser, we really see the value of being heavily creator focused, and we're investing a lot of time in building new tools and technology for creators to help them access this new ecosystem and start to use Fountain. So we're releasing a dashboard, which will allow you to manage everything to do with your show. You can like and reply to all the comments you get. You can actually promote your show, so you can stream sats to your listeners. All these features exist already in the app, but actually putting it in the browser window to make it more accessible for them and give them more control. The music stuff I mentioned is coming late this month or early August, which will be really exciting to see. One cool thing as well is that you can actually set up like a music podcast now. So let's say if you wanted to do an hour-long episode and just play some of your favorite music, the splits that we were talking about earlier, Ken, you can actually have them automate so that when I'm playing a certain track, the splits will be, the money gets diverted to the artist. So you can essentially set up a radio station where all the artists get fairly paid, which is really cool. There's a bunch of stuff coming. Like we're also doing some major sort of UX and UI updates just to really make the best out of what we have and the features, because I think we're still really early. A lot of the stuff we've made has just been pulled together quickly ourselves, or just put straight into code, and getting it to really sing and to be something that as a new user you could just pick up and be like, cool, I know what's going on here, I can get started straight away. So lots of really exciting stuff to come, and if you haven't got Fountain already, go and check it out.
Yeah, I love the accessibility. I love the access for folks. I was just reading this an article. Well, I didn't finish the article. I could only just come in contact with, there was some Royals podcast through Spotify, and I think they were supposed to do 10 episodes. They only had time to finish 7. They got paid $1 million per. And I'm like, well, there's different realities in podcasting going on right now. We have folks who, if they get the time, put in their half hour, an hour, and put in the show, get their $1 million, but they don't have the time for it. And there's everybody else just, doing their things and getting the stuff out there. It's no shade on success. I was talking about hit records, no shade on hit records, some shade on royalty, whatever. I don't know, but it's like that's a different reality of what we're talking about. And I just want to tell you, Nick, for everybody who listens to Something Rather Than Nothing, there's a lot of folks who work on podcasts, a lot of folks who work on podcast movement, of value for value, of podcast 2.0. There's a lot of work to make keep podcasts accessible, to not have them gobbled up, to not have tons of paywalls. And I just don't want to run over that point. I just want to I appreciate the work that you do, Nick. And for podcast listeners, there's a lot of folks out there making sure that podcasts and the way that we enjoy podcasts goes forward. And it's a movement. It's a movement. And I appreciate you talking about those elements, Nick, and for your hard work and success and what you do at Fountain, both for creators and listeners. I wanted to thank you for your time, and I'm excited. I don't get excited about, apps, but I'm excited for the hard work that I see you all doing, and just really want to thank you for popping on the show and chatting, Nick.
No, awesome, man. Thanks a lot for having me, Ken. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, great pleasure, and best of luck with Fountain, and I'll see you on the app.
Thanks a lot.
This is Something Rather Than Nothing.